Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this weekend of November 5th. And before going any further into what Eternals was able to actually pull off at the domestic and international box office, and what the third week of Dune seems to indicate about its financial future, please make sure to smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also smash that rumble button if you're watching over there. Also be subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So of course the big news of today is Eternals finally has been released, and after much pomp and circumstance about the film, was it going to make $100 million domestically? Was it going to make $80 million domestically? The last update that I had said it was going to be around $78 million domestically. Ended up being $71 million. Now, obviously, this could get adjusted up or down on Monday. These are things that typically happen. Normally, the shifts aren't that much, but $71 million. This means that Eternals is officially the lowest domestic opening weekend for the MCU in 2021 in comparison to Black Widow, which, remember, was competing against itself on Disney Plus, and also Shang-Chi, which had almost no recognizable names other than Awkwafina, though to its credit was not as long as Eternals. Eternals is set to be the lowest of the MCU films to come out this year, and there are no other set MCU films, proper MCU films especially, to come out this year that are likely to have anything as low as this. Coming out at over 4,000 theaters, something tells me that Disney is a little bit concerned about what this is going to do, what money this film is going to do in the domestic marketplace, as it is very much behind and will be even further behind after tomorrow's numbers, behind Black Widow, and also, of course, behind Shang-Chi as well, which adds the question of whether or not this film can reach that $500 million threshold it needs to make in order for it to break even. We also saw the third weekend of Dune, which was dropping off now to the number 2 spot, a 51% drop, so not a terrible drop for a film in its third week, making another $7.6 million, losing around 500 screens or so, still competing against itself on HBO Max, which is the reason why its chance of getting to $100 million is definitely doable, but it's going to be much more difficult, especially as the days go on and as more and more films get released, looking especially at Ghostbusters Afterlife, among other films set to get released, going to have some impact there for sure. No Time to Die, making another $6.1 million, only a 20% drop off in its last week. And this is a film that actually keeps on trucking, not just domestically, but internationally. And the number of the film jumped another like 40 to $60 million from last weekend when you add in all of the numbers. So this is a movie that, even though it's not at the point of profitability yet, is definitely moving at a pace where, if it keeps the pace up, might actually get relatively close to the break-even number. It's actually guaranteed at this point to overperform based off of my own estimates, which of course were cobbled together because of the delayed release of the film, which made it very difficult to even predict the film in general. But the movie still doing a lot better than I think a lot of other people would have expected in comparison to its actual budget, because it still needs to make $750 million in total to actually break even in its 5th week of release. Venom: Let There Be Carnage still coming in strong here at the number 4 spot, another $4.4 million, only a 22% drop. This film will reach $200+ million by the end of next weekend. It'll be interesting to see how much beyond the $200 million mark it gets there. While you have The French Dispatch, which is the latest film coming out from Wes Anderson. This film, again, adding on more theaters in its very odd attempt to have this very slow rollout domestically. I've heard some pretty good things about it, especially from people that are Wes Anderson fans. It is available at theaters near me, so it's definitely on my list of things that I would like to see at some point in a theater. In its 3rd week of release, though, obviously still very hard to say whether it's a success or not, just because of the way in which it is getting released. What we have seen is a new film, Spencer, which I cannot really cover that much about because it is an independent film from Neon that only came out at 996 screens, so really not a whole lot there to cover. Though $2.1 million at that number of screens is still relatively good, especially when you compare it to other larger films and the per theater number compared to those films. Antlers in its second weekend saw a 53% drop, making $2 million, where Last Night in Soho saw a 57% drop, and this puts Last Night in Soho in a very precarious situation, basically indicating that it is likely going to be a financial flop and failure for Focus Features, whereas Antlers, it's really hard to say because they have not released any official production budget as of the recording of this video. And of course, you can see what the other movies there mentioned or that I did not mention and how well or not well that they did in this weekend. So first off, let's talk about Eternals. So if you look at the worldwide number, it came in at $71 million domestically, but made $90.7 million internationally, so it actually performed much better internationally than they expected, but didn't do as well domestically. Definitely still fell within the range that Disney was given. Again, we'll see exactly how the number potentially gets impacted and adjusted in the Monday and Tuesday that follows after, when they give us an actual number instead of just the estimate. But usually the estimates are pretty spot on. The $90.7 million internationally, though, definitely a lot better than what they had originally projected. They said the film was going to make around maybe $150 million plus, and at $61.7 million, definitely a fair start internationally. But because this film is the weakest of the MCU films to come out this year domestically, I think that is going to ultimately be the Achilles heel of this film, where a film like Shang-Chi was able to embrace the fact that it had a holiday weekend, even though everyone and their mother was trying to give excuses as to why Shang-Chi probably wouldn't do very well, because they were like, hey, Labor Day, no films do well over Labor Day, when in reality the story was, no, most studios don't put their movies out over Labor Day because there was always this general rule or idea that people don't go to see films during these 3-day weekends. But if you actually look to the data we have, seeing that so many major studios just haven't released their major releases over that weekend, it's really kind of hard to say one way or the other if it could actually lead to financial benefit or not. Shang-Chi was able to actually perform relatively well with that weekend and was able to cross the $200 million mark domestically. This film not really likely to have the same type of support, as it will not have a holiday weekend. It will not have a holiday Sunday or Monday numbers to be able to bolster it up to the 90 plus million, the 95 or so million that Shang-Chi was able to. So this film is going to be falling and trailing films like Black Widow and Shang-Chi for a while, and probably won't ever be able to catch up with it. Internationally, though, we'll have to wait, of course, and see what kind of drop-off we see next weekend. I mentioned this in a previous video. It is available right now in 93% or so of the entire international marketplace. So any drop-off we see from this weekend, the next weekend, we'll have a pretty good idea of whether the film will be profitable or not. So next weekend, I will be able to make a definitive prediction on and projection on how much money this film is likely to lose, because I honestly think, based on these numbers, especially domestically, that is the direction that it is heading, or if it does have a chance, at least, of possibly breaking even, and we'll have that number and have a better idea of that coming in next weekend. Also, of course, it's important to talk about how the media is responding to this. As it says here, Eternals is the weekend king. Oh, I see what you did there. With 91 million overseas, $162 million global international box office, kind of, glossing over the 71 million there, which of course they'll mention right here. But it says Disney Eternals has come in ahead of projections with an opening weekend of 90.7 internationally. Yes, above international, but kind of below, especially when you look back to what their initial estimates were for this film, which had it upwards of $100 million domestically at one point. So coming in below where they expected this film to do domestically, even though it is doing better internationally as such, with $161 million, as it says, paired with the domestic. It's interesting how they kind of buried the fact that it didn't make nearly as much there. This gives the Chloe Zhao-directed film bragging rights to the second biggest worldwide opening for a Hollywood title in 2021. The global debut sets Eternals 26% ahead of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and 8% ahead of Black Widow. In like-for-like markets overseas, that translates to 76% above Shang-Chi and 26% above Black Widow. Oh man, doesn't that sound phenomenal? Doesn't that sound amazing? Oh, wait a minute. What about those domestic numbers? Oh, okay. So you're going to focus on how well it's doing internationally compared to those other films, but let's talk about the fact that it is, as I said, the lowest grossing opening weekend for any MCU title. Shang-Chi had $75 million by the end of its opening weekend, 3-day opening weekend, whereas this film has $71 million. Black Widow, of course, won the weekend with $80 million. Well, let's talk about films and how quickly these other two films were able to reach $100 million. Shang-Chi was able to reach $100 million by its first Tuesday. The first Wednesday was when Black Widow was able to reach its first $100 million, which means, what? Eternals probably won't reach it until its second weekend? Maybe? And then we'll have to, of course, wait and see what kind of drop-off we see domestically as well. Now, we could see a situation similar to what we're seeing right now with No Time to Die, which is having an incredible run internationally. We could potentially see that. Remember that Eternals just needs to make $500 million worldwide in order for it to break even. So there is still definitely a potential for that to happen, especially when No Time to Die didn't really do much of anything in the domestic marketplace, interestingly enough. But that's a pretty big if. That would mean that it would have to perform an insane amount week to week with very little drop off in those markets. The other thing too, of course, is that No Time to Die had a very strategic way of opening up in specific countries at specific times, trying to build momentum, and they seem to have been pretty successful in that. Still short of the $750 million worldwide it needs to break even. However, definitely a different marketing strategy, whereas Eternals is basically saying everything all at once, almost every single market that it could be available in. Again, 93% of the international market currently available and have access to this film. So we'll have to wait and see what that second weekend drop-off, not just domestically, but internationally, is going to be, because that's going to be the big indicator of whether this film is a giant box office, and it's not going to be a giant box office, as far as net gain, net profit is concerned, but will it be able to get to the break-even point, maybe make a little bit of profit, similar to what Shang-Chi was able to do, or will it instead be one of the biggest financial flops of this year? As of right now, it's sitting at negative $200 million, and obviously it's because of the massive $200 million budget that the film has, but what will it be next weekend? That is going to be, of course, the big question. We also had the third week of Dune, which is now at $330 million. Remember, it only needs to make $412 million to break even, but don't get too excited. The number that you see there that is really propping this number up is that $246 million international number, which is slowing down because it's been out in so many markets for over a month now. And so it really doesn't have much left play in a lot of the international markets, whereas domestically, even though it's performing better than a lot of the other HBO Max releases that have had to compete against themselves, it's in a position where it might reach 100 million. I still think that there's, again, I still have my doubts about that, but it still theoretically by the end of its run could get at least to crossing the $100 million mark there. But because it's slowing down here, and you might get $100 million here, potentially, maybe, you're looking at a situation where you're having a film that might get to be able to be 375, 380, which, let's say it does get to that point where it at least gets close to $400 million internationally. That would put it within a position where one could easily justify 4K Blu-ray sales, right, hard copy numbers, VOD sales, etc., making up for it. So even though the box office run would have been a financial loss and financial failure, we could at least say that the film in the long run was able to make its money back. But as I always talk about, I talk specifically about box office numbers and where it stands right now. Box office wise, it seems that Dune is still set to have a loss of money. Antlers is a film we can't really say whether it will lose money or not, because there's no production budget that's been stated for this film. I'd imagine somewhere between $10 and $20 million, but hey, really can't say at this point. That being said, $12.6 million after 2 weeks last night in Soho, which we do have a production budget for. Not looking very good for this film. It's around $46 million, I want to say, in production budget, not counting in marketing. $12.8 million after 2 weeks. Not a very good or strong start there. And again, obviously, we'll see this more so, especially going into the actual box office charting for the film. But those are the current numbers as we see them. Let's go ahead and go into some of the box office charting. So as you can see, let me go ahead and back out of this just a little bit. $161.7 million worldwide Eternals opening weekend. Once we get those week 2 numbers, I'll be able to fully flesh out these numbers without having these ones with the lines through them, which is, again, because of the delayed release. These numbers really aren't that reliable as far as the actual projections are concerned. Eternals will not have that issue. I will be able to make an official pronouncement, as you could say, about that film next weekend. But $161.7 million means right now it's at negative $202.9 million. Still has a long way to go to break even. Maybe it gets there internationally. Domestically is not going to give it much help based on the numbers we currently have available. Last Night in Soho with $12.8 million right now is sitting at negative $56 million, and right now is pretty much guaranteed to lose money because of a total marketing cost, or a total cost with marketing, of $64.5 million, meaning the break-even number for is around $107.5 million. Film is not expected to get anywhere close there, so we're looking at a film losing somewhere between $49 and $53 million, but I don't really think they expected the film to be a massive hit. Recent comments from people in the studio said that they are totally fine or are happy with where this film is and how it's doing, so I would assume that they're thinking that the film's going to make its money up somewhere else in the future. We'll have to, of course, wait and see on that. Films like Dune, again, with $330 million now worldwide, still at negative $49 million, but as you can see, that $412 million still very much, one could say, within reach, but as I said, internationally, it is slowing down so much so that it's going to be really hard for me to really see a path forward in the markets that it's still available in, because it's pretty much made what it's going to make at this point in time. What we can say is a film like The Last Duel, which is going to be one of the biggest box office flops of the year at $135 million, actually, compared to its first 2 weeks, still actually is doing pretty well. The issue and the problem, the thing that killed this film, was the massive budget for the movie, and of course just people not going to see it. And I'm trying to think about any other films worth mentioning. Venom 2 now at $89.7 million as far as net gain, net profit. Shang-Chi at $25.9 million in the net gain, net profit range there. So again, films doing very well based on the numbers that we have available to us. And we can see again that there are these key differences in these major releases, right? You have these $161.7 million worldwide opening for Eternals. Let's try and see if we can find a similar one. Shang-Chi worldwide made $127 million, but had a massive domestic showing, which Shang-Chi, or rather Eternals, does not seem like it'll be able to get close to doing really at all. Black Widow had $158.8 million in its worldwide opening, but this film was able to basically had a massive drop off every day after the fact, and all the blame, of course, was put on the fact that it was going up against Disney+. So that's what's going to be the most interesting, is that they will not have the same excuse for Eternals, and that's why I think, as I covered in my video the other day, I think the media is already starting to try and paint this as being an MCU Marvel problem. It's a problem with the movie. It's too long of a film, not as many show times. It's all this or all that. Kind of trying to prep for the fact that, hey, it's doing well now, but if after that second weekend the numbers are not looking nearly as good because of drop-offs, it's no one who they would want to anger's fault, for instance. It's not like they're going to blame, Bob Iger or anyone like that, or let alone, right, the Lord Kevin Feige of the MCU, but it is still something worth talking about nonetheless. What are your thoughts? Eternals, $161.7 million, definitely a lot better than what people had expected to make worldwide, but still cannot forget the fact that in comparison to other like-for-like films coming out this year, not doing as well anywhere close. Look at that Sunday drop-off, especially 16.2 versus the $22 million of Shang-Chi. Yeah, now this had a holiday weekend, so that's why more people probably went out on that Sunday, since a lot of them had the day off on that Monday. However, it's not looking incredibly strong for Eternals. It's not doing that much better in the Friday market or in the Saturday market compared to these other films to really be able to justify this film being a success in any way imaginable. And I would say that this film likely will end up more like Black Widow, which was able to get to around $183 million. I could totally see Eternals making less than that in the domestic market, not getting anywhere close to the number here of $223 million of Shang-Chi. The question's, of course, going to be, does it continue to do well internationally? Do we also see some massive box office drop-offs there? And of course, the question of the actual cost of this film and just how much of an impact that is going to have on the future. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that, oh man, it's performing so much better than all these other films internationally? That's, of course, if we just ignore the fact that it's not performing as well domestically. Do you think Eternals did well this weekend and that it is on pace to be a box office success? Or you are kind of like me where you say, hey, let's just wait and see on it. It definitely performed better internationally, but domestically, I definitely think it is showing some big problems there. Let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button, smash the rumble button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my November Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals members. Starting first off with Patreon, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator, Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob the Juice, JC, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura the Modern Major General Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange at Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out to my Subscribe Star members, UAB, Mad Dog, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J, Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, and J Rod, the Beer Guru, and of course, ZK Man. Thank you very much for supporting me over there. And to my 3 supporters over on locals.com, Kara Tharp, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video I do on the channel, check out that top link in the description below to find out how to sign up to the various levels that exist, including the most basic level where you get a shout out, the secondary level, the Army of Asgard, where you get that, plus access to a giveaways exclusive server where I give away things like 4Ks and Blu-rays and digital codes. All kinds of stuff, a lot of fun. You then also have the Keeper of the Bifrost level where you get all that stuff, plus access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. You get to ask us questions, and you get also access to that and the entire library of podcast episodes that we have done. And then there is, of course, the Chosen of Valhalla level, where not only do you get all of that, but also in your first month, you get a t-shirt of your choice and sent to you anywhere in the world. Of course, just let me know your size and the color option that you want. It'll be sent to you that first month. And also, you get to be featured on the once a month Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we have a ton of fun talking about movies and projects and all kinds of stuff. Pretty much anything that the Chosen wants to talk about is on the table. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out that top link. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.